So obviously the first thing to say is a great story is a great story, and that's what we always try and find, great stories. But I think perhaps more important than that was our realization of how to tell a very, very complicated and very, very important story to a generation of young people who are trying to understand what was going on. At the time, we saw what was on CNN, other news networks, and it was very, very, very fast. People often tell us that we're fast and furious and in your face, but actually, if you turn on to some of these networks, it kind of feels faster than us. We try to slow things down, and we try to tell a story that young people would understand. So we took this story of this Iraqi heavy metal band to tell the story of what was going on over there. And what you end up with, I think, this is a big lesson for us, something incredibly empathetic. With Vice News, we try and think of Vice News as an empathy machine. If you actually show people of the same age living the same kind of life in a very complex situation, an uncomfortable situation, you can begin to understand what life's like out there, and the news story that you are receiving becomes your own, and you can understand it much better. We then took that successful video and created a number of things out of it. We entered it into film festivals. We actually made an album with the band and released the album. We released a book of their story, and obviously this was before we were doing digital video online. We made a DVD. To this day, we try and find as many different ways to syndicate that content and tell the fullest, richest story that we possibly can.
And I think this is a great example. This is right before, I mean, if you look at the numbers, and me being nerdy, of course, we were doing online video before then, but it wasn't really accepted a lot by the market. This is a video, this is a niche story. There's a niche audience out there that wants to see this. This being on DVD, of course, limited our distribution, right? The same way that TED, TED has been around for much longer than people realize, and it was distributed. If you bought a BMW car, you got tape cassettes for TED. It wasn't until online that people said, oh, this is something, they started kind of sharing it. And Vice, we almost had that same opportunity, that this was a finite resource that was distributed, whether it be DVD or magazine. And then when this same storytelling went to online, all of a sudden, it was being shared massively. So I guess, Vice and TED are kind of the same thing. One, TED, they tell you a story and what they've learned, and we just kind of put you in the middle of Baghdad and hope you don't get shot. But I think it's important to show that where digital has really been the distribution partner in all this. And truthfully, if you look at companies like maybe Burton Snowboards, where they were really, if you talk about pioneering a sport, they pioneered snowboarding films. They pioneered snowboarding, then snowboarding films. The problem was they had traditional distribution and didn't grab onto digital. Meanwhile, Red Bull, which only grew up in the digital age of distributing their content, they were able to distribute the snowboarding videos, where now people, when they think of snowboarding videos, they think of the Art of Flight that Red Bull did, not the 30 years that Burton has made snowboard videos for. So I think it was an important time, and if you look at the history of Vice, it was an important time for us, and this was a crucial moment, that we could have become a film, purely just done films. Instead, taking a look at this and saying, here's what we can be doing digital. And the important part was distribution allowed that all the niche audiences we were trying to serve could finally have access to our content. One of the reasons why I truly believe that we succeed is we do tell niche stories. We don't tell the mass appeal stories. That's where the internet lives. That's the best part, is there's just a bunch of niche-y, weird people living somewhere that want to hear these stories, and they haven't been able to get it from the mass approach. So all the things that really were true to the beginning of who we are is what, this was kind of a big turning point for the company, and then of course realizing what digital, not as anything other than just distribution, making sure it could get into anyone's hands who really wanted to see and consume this content.
Yes. Now we're going to jump.
Sure. I think it's important here to note, Vice is a media company. We're sometimes said as a tech company. What's important, there's a lot of, I think, media companies that went out there and invested a ton of money in creating technology that no one uses, or that people don't like using. Or we all know you have to download Flash Player 6.5 and Shockwave in order to even see the content. And they were all of a sudden dinosaurs because they weren't able to adapt and work within the platform. Because Vice loved telling that great story, all of a sudden these platforms that were coming out, and Shane does the reel when he says, everyone's investing platform, but no one had, content to fill the tubes with. And we kind of make that joke all the time in the office, because I've seen that, sizzle reel 100 times. But what's important is he had a really good point, was that as everyone was sitting there and they are investing in these community websites where people could just talk, they were just having their conversations. There wasn't quality content. That's why Vice we're very fortunate to be very I think have excellent partnerships with some of the biggest companies in the world, ones that compete, and usually they don't want, they would have exclusives, but we're kind of the Switzerland where we're able to work with all these major companies. Now we said Snapchat, that has a different experience to us. Facebook's Anthology, which is their premier program for advertisers and storytellers, we were the first people that they came to. We were the foundation for the Facebook Anthology where they're saying, look, you know how to tell those great stories. That's what Facebook is trying to do. It comes very natural to what you're doing. YouTube has always been a gigantic partner of ours. We still are one of their premier partners. They've been very helpful in everything that we do. And of course, when they talk to our clients about telling these long stories, they tell us. And important to note is that when YouTube looks at what the storybook is, and I'm sure people present, they say every video has to be 3 minutes, every video has to be 30 seconds. They try to break it down smaller and smaller. Well, we were putting 30-minute videos up on YouTube, and we were getting millions of hits. So we either we're either the exception or we weren't just traditionally following the rules. I think that's part of Vice's MOs. Wherever there's a rule, they do the opposite of it, and sometimes it is successful. But I think that's important to look at the success of what we've had for YouTube as a big turning point for what we're doing. And of course, we have partnerships with Twitter and Tumblr, and it's exciting for us is as these platforms raise, they cultivate niche audiences. We all know that Tumblr is a completely different group of readers and people who are interactive, so making that content. Or someone like Twitch in the future clearly is a different audience. So I think it's exciting for us that as we look at these platforms, they're coming to us and say, hey, how do you tell premium stories? How are those premium stories put in the pockets, because it's mostly mobile, of our users?
Yeah, I think the other really important point is we're not just trying to put content onto these platforms. We're actually trying to create our brands and extend our brands. We say to a lot of brands, every brand today has to think and act like a media company. And what we really mean by that is actually having a deep purpose that's worth following. Like in each of these instances, we're asking people to come back to us every day or to follow us. If you're asking someone to follow you, you have to figure out where you want to take that person to, daily, weekly, monthly, throughout the year, and it's a journey. I think when brands try and create content, they just put a piece of content on there, or their brands are too static, there's no journey there. So literally every single day when someone comes to one of these different channels to experience the Vice brand or the Noisy brand or the Motherboard brand, we're giving the next chapter of that brand through content. Every single piece that we release is another part of that story, actually represents who we are. And that's the trick today when you're trying to speak to someone. It's not just trying to get a one hit video, it's trying to create a media property. Even if your job is to sell widgets, you still have to speak to people often, but with a media company with a purpose. This is why you should come to us, and this is where we're going to take you to. And if you come to us for that, it'll be a very, very, very valuable experience. I think there's another lesson there for brand marketers. I think really for the first time in history, the marketing that we're able to do can be as valuable as the product or service itself. So if you're selling some kind of beverage, you could think about the content that exists next to the selling of that beverage as another serving of that beverage. And you can experience the same kind of brand feeling you might have from drinking that beverage. It's an incredibly exciting time to be doing what we're doing.
Absolutely.